All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here for a special edition of the Best Ball Mania 4 Leaderboard Show. Not only is it Halloween, not only is it the NFL trade deadline, but we also have a special guest, Kyle Dvorchak of NBC Sports. Let's get to it, gang. Right. I am Liam. We have on today Kyle. Kyle, man, how you doing today? How's the NFL season treated you before we get into talking about all the nitty gritty?
It's all right. I mean, the summer's way more fun because you actually do all the drafting then. And like for me, NFL season is mostly work. So I just get to kind of like hang out and rip drafts in July. And then the sowing happens. The reaping is really fun. Or the sowing is really fun, but the reaping is less fun because I just have to sit around and work all day. No more drafts. But it's been a decent start to the best ball season for me so far, and decent fantasy season in general. Trade deadline was, as it always is, really boring.
It was very exciting that we're about to talk about, just like Kyle said.
There is some interesting stuff though. Josh Dobbs really does actually matter as much as he's an uninteresting player. Matters a ton. Plus, I also think even if it was defensive moves, there are a bunch of moves in the NFL that at least gave us hints of like what teams feel their rosters are capable of. So even if it's defensive player goes to this team, tells us a lot about what the team thinks of their own roster.
All right, guys, put a 1 in chat if you think I had the best Halloween costume. I am a fairy, of course. And put a 2 in chat if you're rocking with Kyle's costume, which is Suburban Dad.
I used to have a tiara.
Again, 1 for me, fairy, 2 for Kyle, Suburban Dad. Just let me know, guys. Let me know whose costume you're rocking with on this lovely Halloween. Before we jump into the nitty gritty, a little bit of what's defining this season, as always. Jimmy, thanks for your support there. 1 + 2. That means to both of us. Injuries is defining the season as always. Unfortunately, we lost Commander Kirk, the Creed lover himself, Kirk Cousins for the season. We've lost Deshaun Watson for part. We've lost Aaron Rodgers for the season, or maybe not, depending on what experimental drugs he's doing. Jets fans seem to think he's coming back. We lost Mike Williams, so injuries are always a part of best ball. Seems like it's hitting a little bit more this year, but I'm sure that's always
that feels like a very odd spot where they've all in NFL there are cluster injuries where one right guard going down isn't going to move the spread a lot, but right guard, the Jets right now, they lost, they were without, I think, Joe Tippmann, center, going into last week. Then they lost his backup early in the game. Then they lost that guy's backup in the game. And they had a legitimate non-center playing center. None of those guys individually should move the spread in the slightest. I think it was the very first snap of the, quote, 4th-string center. He was just a backup other lineman who had to play center. He played 1 game of center in college, immediately fumbles the snap, botches the snap to Zach Wilson. Cluster injuries at one position or similar positions like offensive line can matter a lot in the NFL in the same way that, one Kirk Cousins injury probably doesn't completely shake up the landscape of how drafting worked, but having the sort of bunch of Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, who went all of those injuries happened in the same range. None of the early quarterbacks got hurt, and this mid-range that looked like it was going to be successful. Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, he can provide usable rushing numbers. He's terrible this year, but usable rushing numbers maybe. Kirk Cousins was putting up massive stats. They weren't a great team, but he was putting up fantasy stats. Anthony Richardson was going to crush. No clue what's going to happen with Rodgers. Literally saw nothing from him. But all of those,
I think he was going to smash, man. I think he was
I could see it.
He looked scary out there, and Garrett Wilson's been so good. I think they might have even
good.
I think they're going to beat Bills with Rodgers. Obviously, they won with Zach Wilson, so that's not a hot take. But no, you're right. I mean, some of my top teams, one of my best high stakes teams is a Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson team. I have other teams where I'm hoping Trey Lance plays quarterback this year. Not a spot you want to be in, but let's jump into it first. I think before we do the typical breakdown on this show, we'll just run through the trade deadline. Real quick, I'll just read them off, and then we'll talk about the ones we actually care about. Leonard Williams, defensive tackle, was traded to the Seahawks. That's maybe matters for the Seahawks defense. The big one, Josh Dobbs, traded to the Vikings. This was actually a surprise to me. A really good guard, Ezra Cleveland, from the Vikings, traded to the Jaguars, which maybe is both a bump to the Jaguars passing game and running game. The 49ers got Chase Young. I don't think we care about that. And the Bears got Montez Sweat. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been traded to the Lions from the Browns. A lot of people are saying that's Jover for Jameson Williams. I'm holding the light on. I think it could just be a Marvin Jones thing, but we'll see on that. And then right at the buzzer, the Bills got Rasul Douglas from the Packers, which means a lot for their defense. Maybe fantasy impact because they won't let up as many points, but and then nothing else. So, I mean, the big one here, let's just start with Josh Dobbs. I think the big thing to me with Josh Dobbs is the target rates for the tight ends in Arizona. And so to me, it seems like, Hawkinson could smash. He's been averaging like a 20% target share. If that gets up to 30%, that's a smash. I think Addison becomes like a Hollywood Brown type guy. And then when Jefferson comes back, he maybe destroys Hawkinson and Addison, and Jefferson is just kind of like souped up Hawk. So I don't know. That's my take on it. How are you viewing Josh Dobbs to the Vikings and the fallout there?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way that like Josh Dobbs is just not a guy who's going to go out. Like there's a reason we got like some usable games from Hollywood Brown. And even then, like it wasn't like he wasn't targeted, but he was a very prairie yardsy kind of guy. And I think Jordan Addison is like unfortunately going to fit that bill where like probably sees a target share dip, regardless of Justin Jefferson coming back, probably sees a slight target share dip in whatever like the first game, second game, what Dobbs ends up being. If it's this week or not, I'm not entirely sure. But on top of that, probably he obviously sees a target quality dip. But even you don't get the same type of upgrade from quote Jaron Hall to Josh Dobbs that you do with Hawkinson, because like Dobbs is a fine distributor of like near the line of scrimmage, not past the 6 types of throws. Hawkinson is going to feast on those, even if sure, like you rather have Kirk Cousins. The hit is from Cousins to Dobbs way bigger for a guy like Addison, who actually needs someone who can throw deep down the middle of the field. Dobbs really just isn't good at that. He's not good at much. He generally has protected the ball well up until recently, and he can hit Trey McBride in the flat or whatever. But he will try to make Jordan Addison a thing, but he's not going to be nearly as successful as Kirk Cousins was at that. He should do all right continuing to make TJ Hawkinson a thing. I think even when Justin Jefferson comes back, probably still top 5 numbers for TJ Hawkinson, downgrading him from like arguably number 2 at worst number 3 numbers. But the downgrade for Addison, I think, is going to be pretty bad. And we're not that we cared too much about KJ Osborne, but if you did, you don't have to anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Hawkinson could be like an all-time PPR scam guy, just like 12, 14 targets a game. I would have thought maybe the Jefferson return is a little bit less likely with Dobbs, but I think a report today says that he's nearing return. And to give Josh Dobbs credit, the Cardinals O-line, I think, was like 22nd or like worse in the NFL. And the Vikings is like a top 5 O-line. So that's at least better. Addison has kind of been like getting there on efficiency anyways. Like he's very good, right? But he's like sun running touchdown. So that can maybe hold. So I don't know. I think it's about as good as you can hope in Vikings land. What's the next trade that you want to talk about fantasy wise?
Yeah, I mean, the Ezra Cleveland one, that's not that much of a surprise. They were playing, I mean, he was like a little banged up, but it always felt a little fake. Like they were fine using Dalton Reisner as their left guard. Cleveland can also play tackle, so he's got some versatility. He had essentially more value as a trade chip than he was actually starting for them. After that, I think the Commanders, both from a football perspective, but also from a real life perspective, they've understandably completely given up on the season. But that feels like it's a good thing for Sam Howell, right? Because if they were not complete sellers at the deadline, if they were still contending this year, you'd think they may be close. One more Sam Howell implosion away from saying, let's see what we have in Jacoby Brissett. Not that Sam Howell's been terrible. He's like a fine thrower of the football. Dude cannot stop walking into sacks. They don't have a good line. He also, like PFF has him charted as responsible for a lot of his own pressures and sacks. even if he struggles at some point, like he had a good week last week, they lost, but at least put up a ton of counting stats and didn't get sacked more than like once by the Eagles, I think. He'll probably walk into a bunch of sacks in the coming weeks. It's less of an incentive for this team to bench him now than it was since they traded both Chase Young, who I'm shocked in my evaluation of Chase Young. They only got a 3rd round pick for him versus Montez Sweat got a 2nd. But this is something that all of the NFL talking heads had alluded to up until this point. So like the results, I'm not shocked by, but the process that led to them only getting a 3rd round pick for Chase Young, what will be like the very end of the 3rd round, I think might even be a 49ers comp pick that they sent. I don't know.
It was a real pick, but they have comp picks. Yeah. Which is honestly worse. Like you don't want their real pick because they're going to be picking at the back half of.
No, the comp picks get tacked into the end of the round.
But I think they have
always go to the end.
I think they have some other teams' picks though, which could have been higher in that round. What I wanted to say with Sam Howell, I think he's been QB5 in fantasy over the past 2 weeks with like names like Josh Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar, and then Sam Howell, QB5. So, I mean, he's getting it done in fantasy, even if he's eating sacks at a crazy rate. And I'm with you where on a give-up season, that does not scream, let's see Jacoby Brissett. That screams.
We still could, but it feels like the odds decreased a little bit.
Yeah. And their defense being worse is maybe good for fantasy. Who knows there? I guess the last one real quick, Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, he's not been good this year. I think this is like, I know a lot of people, now I want to see their exposures to Jameson Williams on these tweets, but a lot of people are like, oh, it's over for him. Did he drop a ball yesterday? Sure, but he also pulls coverage. I think this is related to Marvin Jones leaving the team mostly, because I don't think a team that's 6-2 wants to only have Jameson Williams and Josh Reynolds capable of playing outside wide receiver, really, along with Amon-Ra. So I think it's insurance, but maybe it is. Jameson Williams still has a wide range to me. He could have 2 touchdown games this season. He could have 6 to 8 touchdowns on the year. He could be benched and we never see him again. They didn't trade him, obviously, so I think they view him as part of the long-term plans. But what's your objective view of the DPJ trade?
Yeah, I'll say it's probably fair to call this more of assuring the depth, but he is a better depth option than they have right now when like the guys who could be seeing those like outside routes are like Antoine Green, who was either a late round pick or like a UDFA, Khalif Raymond, and then they've been using Josh Reynolds as an actual mainstay of the 3 and 2 wide sets. But I will say that like adding anyone with a semblance of talent, I think DPJ is better than the backups they have. Obviously, he's not better than St. Brown, maybe not better than Williams, but having anyone with a semblance of talent on this roster is really bad for Jameson Williams because they have no interest in scaling his routes up. They've consistently held him at below 50% of the team's routes. It fell last week. He got back up to almost half in week 7, and then it dropped back below 40% in week 8. Like, clearly, they're not interested in playing him in a full-time role. I don't want them to have excuses for them to continue to do that. In an ideal world, they have no one else, and they're forced to keep throwing him into the rotation. Sort of the way that, like, I don't think the Bills really care what they have in Khalil Shakir, but when they can't play 11.5 personnel anymore, they have to run 3 wide, and he goes out and he gets 70% of the routes. Like, does it really matter too much in terms of, like, what they want to do? No, but he was the beneficiary of a bunch of injuries forcing them to play 11. You don't have, or at least you have one fewer out to that in that, let's say they didn't trade for DPJ and Josh Reynolds gets hurt. Oh, that's actually an out to them using Jameson Williams on 80% of the routes. This is another way for them to tell themselves, we're not going to play Jameson Williams. Even if it's maybe not a direct indictment, there have been almost no barriers to entry for Jameson Williams, and he refuses to knock the no barriers down.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions on the bye here, so to your point, I think we're either going to see like Jameson Williams like 60, 70% of snaps off the bye, or we could see DPJ on the offense. They have the bye to get him worked into the team. I think it's not written. We will see. Even though DPJ is capable, I don't think he has the speed to really pull coverage like JMO. So I think the Lions, like, they're making a concerted effort at least to get the guy the ball, right? He had that touchdown. He dropped another one against the Ravens. It was garbage time, and he didn't play a lot of snaps. And then yesterday, he dropped a really bad pass that like Goff threw with anticipation, and he probably scores if he catches that with so much speed, but it was exciting at least to see him get used. We'll see though. All right,
I don't know, man. I would not say using him on like 40% of their routes is a concerted effort. I mean, Dan Campbell talked about in the offseason, like, yeah, he's never going to have good hands. Like, Dan Campbell's not in on this guy. And like, that's fine. There's still outs for him to be successful, but the team doesn't like him. So, and he continues to prove them right is the problem. He's not forcing the issue in any manner. So, and we can tell this because like Josh Reynolds is a like special teamer, career journeyman. He's fine. He's one of the like 96 best receivers in the NFL, and he's running all the routes. They refuse to let JMO get on the field for like a meaningful role. So, like you said, the bye week could be a good chance to install him more into the lineup. We'll probably know very quickly after that bye week what we're going to get from the rest of the season because it's the perfect opportunity, and it's something we've seen before. It's not like this is sort of a narrative spun out of thin air. It's something we see relatively frequently, and we also know rookie wide receivers on the whole, data does show, I guess he's not technically a rookie, but it does kind of fit the bill of a rookie wide receiver. On the whole, do tend to break out later in the season. If we don't get a good roll out of the bye week, it feels like you could pretty much write him off for the rest of the year. Maybe he still comes down with a long touchdown, but I would call that more of a fluke. I don't think the role would change much if they don't use him out of the bye week.
Yeah, and Goff's not the best at the deep throw, but if, I don't know, like if he's running 40% of snaps off the bye, that is over and managed. In best ball, could he still have like a 3 touchdown game with that? Yes. If his snaps go down to 0, now that is like real. That is a real like, okay, it's over for him. Did you get trade news? What was that face? Anything?
No, I actually don't even know if this is a real source. I just find it funny. There was supposedly a trade in place that a team didn't actually send into the league in time. It's probably fake news. I just like it.
What was it for? You gotta let the
it was just Adoree Jackson from the Giants. I doubt it's actually real though, but I do love
someone messing that up.
It would. I mean, I think it has happened before where teams actually don't send in the trade in time and don't get it off. I doubt this is actually real. Would be fun.
It happens a lot in the NFL draft, and what happens is you just get skipped until you get your pick in. And
I don't think it's happened a lot. I think it happened last in like the early aughts, like 2008 or something.
No, it's happened. It happens a couple times in the NFL draft in like the late rounds when no one cares, and they just get skipped, and another team's allowed to go until you get your pick in. But looking at the quarterback scores on the week, I mean, mostly a normal list here. Sam Howell, ball dog against the Eagles, obviously. Josh Allen QB2 on the week. I think also Josh Allen is allowed to run again. I think the Bills, frankly realize, hey, we got to like give this offense back to Josh if we're going to go anywhere here. The Bills' upcoming schedules, games against the Bengals, the Eagles, the Chiefs, all the top teams, the Dolphins still. So Dak Prescott showed something. That's nice. Joe Burrow popped up here. Hurts popped up here. Will Levis with the most efficient game ever, but I don't know if this is more of like an indictment on Atlanta, who's just like, I don't think Will Levis can beat us, or if he's here to stay. What's sticking out for you at quarterback on the week? And talk to us about Will Levis.
I mean, Will Levis is the one that sticks out. Everything else, even Sam Howell, you're like, well, I think he's second in the NFL in attempts right now, and he will pass Kirk Cousins, who is first in the NFL in attempts as soon as he plays his next game. And he's like fine when he gets the pass off. He's like 12th in touchdown rate and like 19th, I think, in yards per attempt. Perfectly average once the ball leaves his hands, essentially. You let that guy throw the most in the NFL, he'll have a game where he shows up. QB1 is a bit surprising, but he'll have a game where he shows up in the top 5, the top 10. He'll do it a few times. So as a measure of like his variance, I believe that. And then the rest of the names are literally everyone you'd expect until you get to Will Levis. It is very hard to believe that that Will Levis is going to, I think Cam Newton had his most passing yards in a game in his first NFL game ever.
Yeah, he had like 400 or something. It
was like 490, I think. It was crazy. Sure. And yeah, so I didn't realize how good he was passing as a rookie. Obviously, everyone knows he was a good runner, but he's putting up numbers. And I think it was his first, maybe his second game. That was the most yards he ever threw for. Will Levis, 4 touchdowns, like non-zero chance. It's the most touchdowns he ever throws for in a game. It's probably the most efficient he'll ever be in a game in terms of just like.
I think he had 7 rushing attempts though, right? Which is like that could keep his.
I think it was only like 4, and 3 of them were kneels, if I remember correctly, or something.
Okay, like all right. I have a co-manager in a high stakes league that's trying to get me to pick him up, and I'm like,
Look, he's worth picking up. The thing is, evaluating NFL quarterbacks is really, really hard. Like we tend to think we know so much about it, and the NFL tends to think they know so much about it. The Panthers were wildly confident that they were right about Bryce Young, given how much they gave up for it. He looks better off the bye. He looks better off the bye, but like 8 games in, and they appear to have been very wrong on him versus Stroud, and maybe also wrong about him versus Anthony Richardson.
No, definitely. Richardson.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel really good about Anthony Richardson.
Will Levis, average points per game on the season if he starts the rest of the way. Put a number on it.
Like 15.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's at least, he'll
have more usable weeks. This will be far from his last usable week. And even if he did, like, I don't know, his rushing numbers were like, I think he had a few kneels, like I said. He is a super athlete. He's a really good athlete in college, and you saw it on tape. So that is really, even if it didn't show up a ton last week, it didn't need to because he was just throwing bombs. You don't have to run when you're throwing bombs. But that is something that will really help boost his fantasy value. It remains to be seen how much his team actually uses that. Titans kept Derrick Henry, didn't obviously trade DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to be the run first team we've always seen. But I think it's very possible that Will Levis executes on the play action, chuck it deep dream that Ryan Tannehill lived with A.J. Brown for a few years, and that Treylon Burks has been unable to replicate. DeAndre Hopkins might actually be able to provide that for them, where Derrick Henry run, play action, one-on-one, DeAndre Hopkins, chuck it. That can produce spike weeks. So I definitely think, in most formats, I think Will Levis is worth an ad because, one, we have seen this system produce really efficient quarterback play in the past. And two, we don't know with Will Levis. I was totally out on him as a prospect. He falls in the second round. I'm like, sure, that's fine. Take him there. And that's an acknowledgement of the variance of quarterback projections when they have not played an NFL snap yet.
Yeah, I saw something where it's basically DeAndre Hopkins only got 6 targets. And on one of them, the corner fell down where he scored a touchdown. On the other one, the corner thought it was OPI and gave up, and they scored a touchdown. So, and then again, I think NFL defenses might be hey, go ahead and beat us. Or maybe they put a little bit more respect on him, and that hurts his ability to throw deep. Obviously, most teams aren't allowed to throw deep with cover 2. So, yeah, I would add him as a speculative ad, but not high expectations. Moving on to running back, more interesting on half-point PPR. Unfortunately for us, Gus Edwards, RB1 in half-point PPR, RB12, Saquon with insane usage at RB12.
Most carries in a game, I believe, 36.
Yeah,
for him.
Insane. I don't know if you've looked ahead at this DFS slate, but it's the grossest slate ever, and it's also it's 2010 because Alvin Kamara and Saquon are going to be the pay up running backs, and people are going to be like, yeah, let's go. It's 2013.
Yeah. So I haven't looked at the slate yet. Are all the good teams on island games, I assume, because I saw somewhere that there are no games above a 44 total or something, truly heinous things, which also makes it very DFS 2012, 2013, where which terrible quarterback throws 30 times and 3 touchdowns. Whereas more recently, the past few years, it's Patrick Mahomes is locked in for 330 and 3. Josh Allen's going to push for 300, while also dropping 50 on the ground. The elite quarterbacks have absolutely crushed. I haven't looked at the slate, but it seems we may actually have.
The Germany game has Dolphins Chiefs. The Sunday night game has Bengals Bills. And whatever you think the ownership's going to be on Eagles Cowboys, quadruple it because it's the only game. I did a dog bowl draft on Underdog, and the first round ADP is just Eagles and Cowboys players. And then in the mid, Trey McBride was the 33rd overall player in the whole slate. So that's rough. What's sticking out for you for running backs on the week? Let's talk about Kamara. Is this here to stay for you with Kamara with this? He was more efficient this game. I thought he just was getting there on empty calorie targets, which is hard to say. ETN got there on an explosive pass catch. He hurt his ankle, but seemed fine. Austin Eckler back from the dead a little bit. What about Kamara, and what else? What about the running backs on the week stuck out for you?
Yeah, nothing too surprising outside of Gus Edwards. The rest of them are the high usage running backs we're used to see.
Javonte's back.
Javonte is the one I was going to point out, is that he has not been the high usage running back we've been expecting to see. Obviously, Eckler, ETN, Kamara, McCaffrey, even Gibbs without David Montgomery, you're projecting for somewhere in the ballpark of 18 to 20 carries, essentially 16 to 20 carries, and they can easily exceed that, any of them in a given week. Javonte up until this point has not been. He's been truly a committee back. One thing I'll note is he's still not running a lot of routes. He saw 82% of the team's carries last week. It was something 27 carries. He's it was very ambiguous if he'd even be healthy for week 1. And I don't want to say they brought him back too early, but for fantasy purposes, they brought him back at a point in which we shouldn't have been the most excited to start him. We were probably more excited than we should have been when looking at someone like Breece Hall, who, like, my week 1 and 2 projections were like, oh, we're not playing Breece Hall. He's clearly going to be a committee back. I love him, but that's just the reality of the situation. We got the same treatment for Javonte for weeks on end. And maybe they're finally moving away from that, sans the pass catching role, which he still hasn't quite settled yet.
Alvin Kamara, average fantasy points the rest of the way.
18.
Half point PPR?
Yeah. I mean,
that's like a smash.
Yes, very good. Like the usage for him is insane. And like, they don't have a strong reason to go away from it. Derek Carr's fine, but he's not a guy who, like, we got to start dropping back 40 times a game or whatever. Like, and Kamara's looking good this year. He's looking good. So
Tony Pollard, 6 points, RB 37, tied with Ramondre. I'm holding a little bit of light on for Pollard, who unquestionably looks worse. Unquestionably, the play calling's worse, but he's still averaging a decent expected fantasy points per game. And the scripts have just been bizarro land in Dallas. Plus, their playoff schedule is Bills, which plays this zone defense that gives like every running back against them 8 catches or so. And then they get the Chargers in there and like the Dolphins, which is just like a smash schedule for the Cowboys in my mind. Tony Pollard, average fantasy points rest of the way, half point.
16. I mean, you pointed out his usage is elite. He is seeing, I think he's still second in the NFL in red zone carries. He just has not converted on a single one of them since week 1. I think he had 2
bobbled that touchdown last week, man. Dude, did you see that?
I didn't see that one, but I saw a few of his stuff.
He like double clutched a screen, and if he just catches it, he would easily score, but he double clutched it, so he got tackled.
Dude, I mean, yeah, his usage, like you said, is that of like a top 5 fantasy back. It's just not getting there. I think the problem is, like you said, he has not been the same back. He's on pace for career lows and rush yards over expected, missed tackles, forced yards after contact. Like, he's not the same guy. There are a lot of potential explanations for it. It doesn't at this point matter a ton to me which one it is, because I'm not sure it changes really. Like, the only one that could change would be that he, I believe, like fractured his ankle and
he gets
high
healthier.
Ankle sprain, gets healthier. They weren't using him like he wasn't healthy. Whereas you look at someone like Javonte or Breece, you're like, oh, is there efficiency at the beginning of the season not where he wanted to be? Yes, but also the coaches are telling us he's not quite ready to play a full role. You'd expect those two things to sort of go in tandem. And it's kind of what we're seeing, whereas like the efficiency and the usage are starting to get married for someone like Breece Hall. The team did not think he was unhealthy in week 1 for Tony Pollard, or week 2 or week 3. Maybe they were wrong about that and they should have more time, but that's like a very narrow pathway for us to really be banking on. I think many people have made this comp, but I think Tony Pollard at this point is like fancy Joe Mixon. All the touches on a great offense. It's just, he's not that good right now.
That is hashtag not great. I mean, the only one for me is he did break his leg against the 49ers in the playoffs. And so, whatever. I had hope off the bye he'd look a little better. Maybe he looks a little better as the season goes, if that's true. Moving on to wideout on the week. CeeDee Lamb, who this is a win for like ESPN Open Score, which I think is Pat Crane pointed out is a nice way to spot some breakouts who've been underperforming, because he ranked really well there. The Cowboys didn't really target him a lot though. Hopkins, insane and efficient week. AJ Brown, per usual. Shaheed, 3 catches, 153 yards. Gabe Davis, man. The Gabe Davis thing is exciting because this is maybe like gives Gabe Davis a floor if he's used like this. Now, I think Gabe Davis was used like this where he had his shortest ADOT ever and his most catches. And he was kind of used like almost like tight end routes. And I think it was their solution to the blitz, where he was like a first read target rate on like 37% or so of his catches. And a lot of that was just like when the Bucks blitz, they just threw it to Gabe Davis and let him do a little yard after catch. So, is he going to be used like that again? I think it depends on, like, a team needs to play blitz and zone for it to work. You can't play like blitz and man because it's like Gabe Davis doesn't get separation. So I don't know, someone to monitor. Both Dolphins guys here as well. Jahan Dotson pops up from the dead what's sticking out for you for wide receiver? Jameson Crowder got there, I guess.
There's no explanation for Jameson Crowder getting there. I could.
No, there is. Curtis Samuel got hurt, so that's why
there's no explanation for Jameson Crowder being on an NFL team at this point.
Yeah.
That is really. I know why he scored, but there's the next level of why is pretty incredible. I literally didn't know he was on Washington up until last week. The other one, speaking of Curtis Samuel, is Jahan Dotson, who has done just nothing up until the past 2 weeks. I'm a little skeptical that this holds. We'll see what ends up happening with Curtis Samuel. I don't know if he's going to play for these upcoming weeks, but like the fact that he couldn't really separate from Curtis Samuel, who's fine, but he's certainly nothing special. That's really concerning for Dotson's outlook. Maybe this is enough to get him going, but we also saw up until last week, like Terry McLaurin started getting way more involved in the offense. He really put some distance between himself and the next guys. Like, to me, Jahan Dotson is probably just a guy. He just happens to play on a team that could, in any given week, lead the NFL in passing just because of how much they throw. I think they might have overtaken first place in pass rate over expected. So if you're going to have a quarterback who's pretty easily capable of dropping 330, 350 yards, Dotson, who still runs every route, could get there. I'm not really sure this fantasy point performance is like a celebration of his talent, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you where it seems like Curtis Samuel needs to be out of the offense to kind of condense that between, and I would still probably put him like third after like Logan Thomas and Terry. But I don't know, like, how do you explain last year? I mean, it was just like hyper efficiency with him just like scoring.
It was mostly touchdowns too. Yeah, that's the thing is like, if you focus on the most random element of football, touchdowns, as far as like our prognostication skills go, he looks really good, but he wasn't really crushing in yards. He was not doing like particularly well in yards per out run. He wasn't a great prospect. It was a surprise to see him go as high as he did. I explained the touchdowns by variance, and I look at the yards per out run and say that's more of the signal. It wasn't dreadful, I don't remember, in yards per out run, but it just wasn't anything special. Like, it wasn't particularly good in that metric. So that's probably who he is, like a guy who's capable of running a lot of routes, like understands the offense well, but is not really going to be like an uplifter.
Hopefully that's not Jahan or Jordan Addison next year as well, who's obviously like sun running touchdowns too. But
I think he's been much better in like yards per route run and targets per route run, though, which are like good things on a player's ability to produce while other good players are on the field.
Sure. He also lost Jefferson aside him, but yeah, he looks better to me. Tight end, we've seen a bit of a resurgence from tight end, helped by the youth projection where, I mean, the young tight ends who are looking like smashes right now, McBride, who's about to get a quarterback upgrade eventually, Laporta, Kincaid, Komet's been fine, Ferguson looks like a smash young tight end and like strong usage numbers there. Hawkinson, we already talked about, he's about to get peppered with targets, probably won't get as many touchdowns. Kittle's always smashes without. Kittle's actually number 1 in ESPN's analytics now over Kelsey after last week. So, it's a week-to-week thing there. But
Kittle's really interesting because he's also getting annihilated in yards per out run. It's his worst season by a wide margin, and it's been a consistent decline. It could just be a usage thing. Like you said, he's getting open, and you watch him, and he doesn't look any worse. But it probably is to some degree just a usage thing where you put as many guys who are extremely talented as they have on the field. At some time, someone's going to fall by the wayside. So I think he's probably just as talented as he's always been, but it's just consistently harder for him to get there when you could throw to Deebo Samuel, the best yak producer in the NFL. Brandon Ayuk is having a true breakout season, or CMC, who's the best pass catcher in the NFL at running back, and maybe the best pass catching running back ever, frankly. So,
yeah, I mean, I still think it's Kittle's ability to block, I think, which is like his biggest problem for fantasy because
he doesn't spend, at least until this year, I haven't checked this year, but he never really spent much of his routes or much of his potential routes blocking. It was like within 1 or 2% of Travis Kelce. Like, he is a really good blocker, but they were like, of course, Mark Andrews literally never blocks in his life. It's like a 10% increase in George Kittle's routes to Mark Andrews' routes. Would I love George Kittle to be that guy? Yes, but his numbers look like Travis Kelce. He's good enough to where, like, I don't really care if he's running 86% of his routes in the other 14 are blocking, or if it's 98 like Mark Andrews. He was good enough. That was not the problem. It could have juiced his numbers by a slight percentage, but it wasn't going to make a big difference.
Who would you rather have between Laporta, Kincaid, and McBride the rest of the way on your team?
Laporta. I just think he's like the best player of the three very clearly. And he probably also has the least competition. Maybe you could argue McBride does, but he's got like one good player on his team. Otherwise, he's his team's number 2 receiver, whereas I think Kincaid is still pushed further down because Gabe Davis is fine. So I think he's probably going to have either the highest or the second highest target share. And he's definitely, to me, he seems like the most talented. They all seem good, but I think he's just the most talented.
I think he's running a bit hot on touchdowns because his ADOT that last game was kind of weird until he got the touchdown. I think I'd rather have Kincaid just based on the offense, and we're really starting to see the keys to the kingdom there. And I think it's possible Kincaid comes to 2 in the offense over Gabe, but we'll have to see about Gabe's short ADOT role.
I think with both Kincaid and McBride, there's a very clear out to the veteran that was getting too many routes, comes back and just takes that off the table. Laporta from week 1 asserted himself as the team's starting receiver or starting tight end. Kincaid and McBride both deserve that role, I think. Like, you see them play and you're like, dude, why are you playing Dawson Knox? Let that guy play 30% of the snaps and have him block and catch a red zone touchdown. He's kind of good at red zone touchdowns, but like, don't play him. His team felt differently. And McBride's team didn't have any care in the world to use him when Zach Ertz was there. So I think those are both like not incredibly likely outcomes. You see Kincaid play and you're like, whenever Dawson Knox is back, don't play him. His team didn't think that about him. So I'm going to say that out is really what would like scare me off of taking them over Laporta. They all have good rest of season outlooks though.
I'm with you where Laporta always to me seemed like this guy could just be the 2 in the offense. But I would say Arizona and Buffalo's way different, where Arizona, there's like zero excuse why McBride should not have just ran ahead of Ertz, because unlike Buffalo, which, Buffalo's like an established team who's been going to the playoffs every year. And you have this guy who is Josh Allen's like best friend in Knox. You're not going to just like week 1 be like, all right, dude, you're like his best friend. I know you play Catan together. We've been to the playoffs. We almost won a Super Bowl with you. But we're going to let the rookie go. Like you kind of have to let the rookie earn your way on talented teams. And I think Kincaid this was going to happen anyways, because we saw Kincaid's breakout game against the Patriots when Knox was healthy. Now, Knox did hurt his wrist and he's been like really bad. And so who knows how much the wrist played into it. And my take on like the Bills are obviously a better team in 11, right? That's not in question. But the object is not to be the best team in the regular season and just like win every regular season game. If the Bills think that having 12 in their arsenal will help them against the Chiefs, the Bengals, whatever, in the playoffs or in like a weird weather game, well, then, of course, you want to use the regular season to experiment that, and elite teams can do that, unlike struggling bad teams that need to claw for wins. All right, let's move on to looking at our top teams. Now, Kyle, looks like you only ripped 5 BBM4s, but you're advancing a monstrous 60% rate. First off, how did you get the username Kyle? Were you just like the first one on Underdog?
Certainly. I was extremely early on Underdog.
Hell yeah, man. And then talk us through your top team here, which is a good team, but it's ran by Wilson and Love. So just tell the people who's on this team and how you feel about it.
I think it's the second team on there that's like a really interesting team. This one's fine. Both the quarterbacks seem like they kind of suck, but
both could be like bench a quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. But definitely both have been like called for benchings already, though like the alternative is like Sean Clifford, who's just dreadful. For Jordan Love and Russell Wilson, it's Jared Stidham. So it doesn't seem likely for either of them. I think a few of my teams, I drafted, the reason I only have 5, I feel like I have like 6 or 7, but it doesn't matter. It's because I drafted way more on DraftKings, like 90.
This is what it shows, man.
No, I mean, I think I have like 7. It's meaningfully not the same, or is the same. But on a lot of my team, not a lot, decent amount of my teams, I had running back plus quarterback, still trying to get pass catchers as well, but like just trying to buy into the offense. And this one has Javonte and Russell Wilson. Try the second team. I have one team that's we need this team to make the playoffs.
I mean, this team, it can make some noise. Love to Musgrave, Russ to Javonte. So you didn't grab a pass catcher, which actually seems the move for Denver. My top team before we look at your second is a Bills alpha stack. It's the same one I had last week. If you watched, just Josh Allen and Bryce Young at QB, Breece Hall, Swift, and Mostert holding it down at running back. Some hope for the back end running backs, Algier and Chuba. Diggs, Metcalf, Gabe, Addison, Mingo, DPJ, Shaheed, Hardy on this one. Maybe there's hope for DPJ. I would global swap Hardy for Shakir if I could, but that's not an option. Shakir, man, the thing was weird with Shakir because the signal was so negative last year where he played really well. And then the Bills literally signed Cole Beasley and John Brown to play over him in the playoffs. And then they bring in these veterans who, I mean, Deontay Harris, when he was with the Saints, balled out. So I bought into him. His offensive snaps were near 0 last week. Tight end is fun with Hawkinson and Kincaid on this one. What's your take for the Chuba versus Sanders thing? I saw a lot of people saying this is just going to be the split down, but I thought Sanders was banged up. So I think it's going to go closer back to even going forward, even though Sanders was a near 0 this past week.
I mean, Sanders, I don't even think was on the injury report last week, and they were coming off a bye the week before that. He has been banged up earlier in the season, but if I remember correctly, he didn't even appear on the injury report. If not, he was cleared. He certainly wasn't questionable. So, and the team, early in the season and in the offseason, they were glowing about him as a potential 3-down back. They were saying oh yeah, they paid him a ton of money as far as running back contracts and the way they're moving. And then heading into last week, Frank Reich was yeah, it's going to be a bit by a committee. We're going to get Chuba more involved. Their tune had just completely changed. And I think what happened is they saw Miles Sanders play for 5 weeks and said, we're done with this. I mean, he's the least efficient running back in the league. And it doesn't only extend to his ground game, which he's near dead last, rush yards over expected per attempt, success rate, but he's also not a good pass catcher. He's been earning targets this year, and shockingly, he's not doing anything with them because he never has since his rookie season. So I think 20% snaps is probably a low for him over the next few weeks, but does it cross 50 again without an injury to someone ahead of him? I would say no.
And a little bit concerning is Raheem Blackshear saw the field too for so if he's going to be grabbing 20% and Chuba's going to be around 50%, that only leaves 30% for Sanders.
So, I mean, he's dead. He's dead as far as what you paid for him. Sure, Chuba gets hurt in week 17 and Miles Sanders scores twice, but as far as a matter of process and what is playing out, just complete L for Sanders.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering because I thought he was banged up before the bye. He
was banged up before the bye. I mean, he missed. You can see Chuba played week 6, and there's no week 6 for Sanders. He didn't play that game. He's banged up, but he came off the injury report for week 8. So that tells me he's likely mostly healthy, as healthy as a player can be this far.
I want to see it next week. If it's 20% again next week, that is down bad. If it's 40%, that's okay, fine, whatever, split. Your second team, you said you liked a little bit more.
This is the one.
Run us
one of the what percent of teams do you think have Kelsey Kupp? That's why I thought.
I'm so bummed that this Kupp discount happened because I was done on Underdog when it happened, and the FFPC, man, Kupp fell to the 5th round or something in those Vegas drafts. That's annoying that exists. On DK, I did all my teams late, and I was just clicking Kupp in the 3rd, and I was all right, fine. But I mean, Kupp was looking awesome, but now Stafford's got the thumb thing, so
we need Stafford to take the week off, buddy. Take a week off, then they get their bye after that, and then he needs to be healthy after that.
And wait 1 second, I can actually tell you the one of the
perfect.
Patrick's told us Patrick keeps on adding a bunch of cool things. One is you can see draft buddies, by the way, guys, so you can see who drafted against you a bunch. But we can search for Kelsey and Kupp teams. And these teams, actually, I'm on the wrong one. We want roster combos. Kelsey and Kupp is on only 425 teams total in the whole contest. And the max, someone has 5, 2 people have 5, some people have 3. And so you're one of the few. You're one of the few.
425. How many entrants are there? 400,000, right? Is that
there is if we just do Kelsey, I think it's 54.
Yeah, you'll find everyone.
No, not AJ Brown. Just Kelsey is on 56,000. So
that times 12, right? Right?
Yeah, 644,000 teams.
Yeah. And so 0.0001% of teams have Kelsey Kupp, and a fraction of those teams have that advancing. And my team looks solid to advance. Not only that, but it also has low advance rate Kyler Murray on the team. Like,
He was about to come back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Low advance rate, Kyler Murray. I would imagine Kelsey doesn't even have a low advance rate is the thing. He missed one game and he's already the best tight end in the NFL again. But Cooper Kupp, like we said, the combo is essentially unowned. Plus Kyler Murray getting in there. This is a team that we need this team to get in. Plus it's a big Cardinal stack with both Rondale and Marquise Brown on the back end of the roster. Like this is a team that can make some noise. This is a team that is built purely for the playoffs and is good to make it there, which is typically the trade-off is that you don't make many of them there and you have a ton of equity if you do.
Absurd.
Wait, what?
I don't understand. I guess they went Kelsey, Tyreek, and they got Kupp in the third. Just crazy.
Oh my God.
Hopefully that team does not advance. I mean, this team.
No, we cannot have that team in the playoffs.
This team is nutted at wideout, where like literally every single wide receiver can give you a usable week. Even Atwell and Moore are more going to be like deep bomb guys, but with Kyler coming back, maybe more is more. But Myers plus is just like the guys you want. Kelsey and Laporta, pretty nutted at tight end. Tannehill, whatever, but Kyler coming back. And then running back, Etienne holding it down. Pacheco giving you some weeks. Dillon sucks. Spears and Ford, though, also good late round guys. This one can definitely make some noise. I would not want to face it in the playoffs. My second highest scoring team, 7,000 overall in the contest, is a Geno Love Howell team. So, 3 quarterbacks playing, Howell giving you some fantasy weeks. It's got Etienne Swift holding it down on the top end, Brian Robinson in the mid rounds. I need Kyron Williams to come back. You have any, Kyron Williams is like supporting a lot of my teams. I need him to come back, and I'm a little bit worried that the Rams might be giving up by then. What's your vibe? Do you think the Kyron injury is closer to 4 weeks, or is it unknown?
I mean, the team in the reports made it sound closer to 4 weeks. Like they made it sound pretty confidently 4 weeks, but teams are always incredibly optimistic on like, as soon as IR's done, he's coming back. And I'm skeptical of those.
Our reporting's been good though. Like it was like on A-Chan. I mean, we've not seen it yet, but like very early, they're like A-Chan's going to be only 4. And I was like, okay. And like the Jefferson stuff's like, he's coming back. So, I mean, they probably don't know.
I was going to say, we don't know that those are yet. So, teams are just always perennially optimistic about their players returning. My vibe was generally that Kyron's injury was like a 4 to 5 week injury. Maybe he misses one extra game on top of the min 4 for IR. But I do think he comes back well before the playoffs and the sprint. And I need that because I have a ton of him on DraftKings. So,
yeah, I got 16% on Underdog, and he's like, he's on like all my 5-5-5 teams, which are like dead. Like I'm getting like no running back points right now until he comes back. Pitts, Laporta, Higbee at tight end, all fine. AJ Brown and Amon-Ra holding it down at the top end. Kristen Watson, he's getting targeted a lot. I mean, whatever. A spike week has to happen eventually. Tyler Lockett, solid. Judy, I didn't draft at all in the third, but he's on this team. He's fine. Mingo looked a little bit better off the bye, and maybe DPJ has life. Kyle, your third team for the people.
I have Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson, like coincidentally comboed in a lot of spots. I mean, this team's not dead. It's just like we really need a sun run with one single quarterback. Everything else,
this is really fun because it's hard to advance Bijan. Bijan's only advancing at a 6.5% clip right now.
Yeah, man, he's like supremely like dead zone vibes. I know when Karain first, maybe it was the follow up to the legendary Upside article, was that like the dead zone starts at pick 1. Like the floors in the early rounds for running backs are just consistently lower. And like Bijan,
and we knew it with Bijan, right? Like we bet on the talent, but we knew that we could be Arthur Smith and against, like I wasn't like blind to. I was like, all right, whatever. Like this guy could break fantasy. I'm gonna take him, but I know that Algiers probably gonna be in there.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it was a bad pick to go with Bijan by any means. Just not the ideal run out. He's still touching the ball a lot, but they don't give him looks in the red zone. And they're still not giving him a high share of the backfield. And of course,
he gets the Bears week 17, so he could be the classic. Like you get him there and you win it all if you do.
Did you have a lot of Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, like 20% plus.
I had a ton of. He was my most owned quarterback, maybe my most owned player. I don't remember.
Probably more in the 5-5-5s, like just like 2 QB with him, which is even worse because it just kind of happened the way where if I had a front half pick, I grabbed a lot of elite quarterbacks, but I didn't get a lot of front half picks in my 5.55s. And on the late ones, I took a lot of Richardson. And so now
we were right. The thing is, we were extremely right.
We were so right. We're so poor, but we were so right.
Yeah.
My last team, or my third team, is 8,000. Overall, it's Hurts and Love at QB, Montgomery, Swift, A.J. Dillon, Gainwell, Kyron, and Rico Dowdle. Some life. A.J. Brown, Watson, Mike Williams, pour one out. Gabe Davis, Myers, Mingo, Shaheed, Kittle, Kincaid, Musgrave. This team's fine. I mean, elite quarterback, A.J. Brown stack. So I reached on Hurts, which honestly, like, reaching on the Hurts pairing or reaching on the Diggs pairing actually seemed to be the move if you couldn't get one of Amon-Ra plus, because like you didn't want Devontae Adams, you didn't want Pollard.
14, you died. Like there was nothing good there,
and maybe you want to
pick like 30, man, that have all been terrible. The running back's bad. The number 2 receivers, like he'd be a number 1 on a lot of other teams. Terrible. Yeah. Like, man, just a bad stretch to where the elite quarterbacks, like they're having good years. It's not like, I don't think we're going to get the greatest fantasy season from any of them, but their relative value to all the other picks you could have made in that range is crushing.
Well, and this is why I think fading elite quarterbacks, I mean, it's always been bad on Underdog to me, where they just contribute a higher total percent to your roster just because it's not PPR compared to skill positions. But the issue with fading elite quarterbacks is you might think, if one gets hurt, then, like one gets hurt, I didn't take one. That's good for me. But if like Hurts goes down for the season, that only makes the power of Lamar, Josh Allen, and Mahomes more impactful, And now I think it's fair to say that elite quarterbacks are actually going to be doing better than they even should be because of the loss of Cousins, Richardson, Rodgers.
That's the other thing that really compounds it. Like it's one thing
it's fair, but like that's part of the range when you take an elite, right? Not that they get injured less, but that if people start falling and you have the elite guys, like it just compounds your advantage. Looking at the top 3 teams in the whole tournament, let's just do these one by one. I'll go first. Shout out DT or D Trout with a 1261, absolutely insane score. It's a Hurts, Kyler, Jimmy G.
He's going to carry Kyler Murray into the playoffs with the best overall. Maybe
he's just trying to lock down to 500K in the regular season. Yeah. It's got ETN, Montgomery, who's coming back. I don't think Montgomery's usage is just going to go back to what it was. I do think
it feels like it can't. It feels like it can't.
It can't. Gibbs looks too good. AJ Dillon, Achan, and Mostert. So we've got the double Miamis. That's common at the top. By the way, Dolphins drawn live to be advanced rate monsters, but playoff disappointments because those playoff schedules are tough. Ravens, Cowboys, and Jets. The 3 defenses I would not want to face. Are they good enough to do it? Yes, but still. Tyreek, Smith, Pickens, Sutton, Zay Jones, Thielen, Curtis Samuel, Michael Wilson, Hawkinson, and Everett. So, I mean, if I looked at this team, would I guess it's top 1 overall? Yeah. No, but like it is. So, Sutton has been Sun running touchdowns. Pickens seems like he's going down in value. Smith has given you a couple weeks. Zay Jones not been playing. Thielen's a smash. Samuel gave you a bunch of touchdowns. Wilson's been fine. Hawkinson's done enough. But, a bunch of disappointment picks here too, like Dylan, Everett.
JG. You would not at all think this was the best team in all of fantasy. But I do think it speaks to the Achan Mostert monster of those 2, plus the David Montgomery and the ETN complete nuke. I think he's got 7 touchdowns in his past 4 games or something. Absurd, that you don't have to get all your picks right. You really just need to get the smashes right. And you can throw away a Zay Jones or a Gerald Everett. It honestly doesn't matter.
Someone's saying, sir, Miami-Baltimore was the thesis. I agree, but I didn't think the Ravens defense would be this good. I remember last year when they had that shootout. I don't know if that's coming again, but we'll see. The second team, Johnny Kolar. Read it off, Kyle.
We have Jalen Hurts, Bryce Young, Travis Etienne, Ken Walker, Damian Pierce, Alvin Kamara, Elijah Mitchell, Raheem Mostert. Interesting that they get Kamara. He's great.
Back room.
Yeah, they smash running back, and they'll have Kamara, who I guess probably won't end up as a low advance rate, but they drug him through to second place despite missing 3 games from him. Tyreek
I'm
Hill,
surprised
Devonta
he's not on
Smith.
first place, honestly. Like this team seems better to me.
I agree with
having
that.
Kamara.
It does seem like it'd be better. I'm guessing. Well, actually, okay. Here's why. It's at receiver. It's still pretty good at receiver, obviously, but Tyreek Hill, Devonta Smith, Michael Thomas, Allen Lazard, Van Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Rashid Shaheed, Puka Nacua, George Kittle, Tyler Conklin. My guess is that the only reason it's not quite in first is the stretch of Devonta Smith, Thomas, Lazard, Jefferson is like 5 guys who aren't doing almost anything. Devonta Smith has 2 good weeks, but probably not what you paid for when you were asking to get. Like
But everyone being bad there, to your point, is like
True.
making him fine. Like he's better
Yeah.
than T. Higgins, he's better than Ridley
Yeah.
so far.
This little run of 5 receivers is probably the reason they're the second best team in all of fantasy and not the first team. Like if they had one more hit in there, they might be able to close the gap. I don't know what it is, but interesting that Puka Nacua wasn't on the first team and Kyron was not on either of these teams, I think. But Nacua just absolute smash. Probably the biggest reason he's not on the first place team is he wasn't drafted 100% of drafts. Harder for him to get to first place when any random 16th rounder was in every draft.
He was drafted more than Kyron, which surprised me on Underdog.
Yeah, it's probably just because
I think it was the late news drafts that did that. But it's hard to know when Puka was drafted. Was it post Kupp injury?
Mm-hmm. It definitely shot up after that. Yeah.
I would say Van Jefferson is the opposite of what Mike Gesicki's been the past couple of years. Mike Gesicki on the past 2 BBM champions, ultimate glue guy. Van Jefferson is like a bad omen for your team. Like this, I'm sorry, Johnny Kolar, but you're very unlikely to win with the Van Jefferson team, even though all the other guys are smashes. Ace Viper, an elite name. I'm kind of surprised that Hurts is on all these teams and no Josh Allen, who I think is outscoring Hurts. But maybe Josh Allen just correlates a little bit less with Tyreek for some reason. Could be randomness. Who knows? Anyways, this team smash QBs, Hurts and Tua, ETN, Swift, Kamara, Ford, Mostert, just like elite running back room. Tyreek Smith, Ayuk, Nico.
Devonta on all 3 of the top teams, despite not having a great season. Like you said, just a few spike weeks from him is more. We have like 1 top 30 game from T. Higgins, like 2 or 1 from I think just 1 or 2 from Calvin Ridley. So it's really not hard to get there. And he correlates with Jalen Hurts, who is having a smash spot. So
yeah, there's a lot of interesting things to talk through that. The rest of this team, more Gallup, Thielen, Aguilar, Pitts, Conklin, Otten. One of the like interesting things that I like to look at is like Tyreek Hill and CMC have scored similar points, but Tyreek Hill is like way out advancing CMC when I last looked. And you have to think that correlates with not only like the other Miami players being good. This week it's closer actually, but also because slightly a CMC team probably took T. Higgins and Smith versus a Tyreek team taking, either like Derrick Henry's been a little bit better, Josh Jacobs. I don't know. There's things in that like Jefferson and Jamar Chase have the same advance rate right now, obviously pulled up by the Vikings correlation pieces and negatively the Bengals correlation pieces where Chase has outscored Jefferson by like 20 half-point PPR points. So, but that is that for the leaderboard section. Usually we look at like tweets around the industry. You put out a lot of tweets, Kyle, about football. Let's just look at some of yours before we get out of here.
Today. Let's really ripping them.
Yeah, let me know what's one of your best tweets you ripped, dude. Let's go through.
Keep scrolling. I had one that got a little bit of numbers.
Well, what can we talk about here?
Most of mine today were all just
trade related,
like actual normie football ones.
How about
Bears
this one?
Doing the most disgusting stuff with their backfield. I had a lot of Roshan. We were really counting. The process feels good.
Wait. I can show you something positive about him. Keep going, and I'll pull it up.
The process feels good in that we saw Khalil Herbert go down, and immediately the backup running back goes in and crushes. Oh, my Roshan bags must be completely popping off right now. Oh, well, you said the backup running back. There's no way it could be Deonta Foreman. They held to scratch him for 4 weeks in a row. Of course, that's not the case. They had brought him back into the fray when Roshan got a really bad concussion, apparently. But it was a good spot, I feel like.
I had said previously that another week's show that I thought it was actually like bad by the market to be drafting 3 Bears running backs when we knew like they're going to be playing alongside Justin Fields. They're on the Bears, and we're drafting 3 of them. Where it's like we weren't, obviously we were doing this because of how ambiguous it was, but should we be drafting 3 Bears running backs when we are drafting like 1 Colts running back and it was only JT? So I thought that was inefficient. But to your point, I don't know. At least Roschon is number 1 in open score on ESPN Analytics. Now, I think
Let's go.
So like the man's always open. Overall,
I was gonna say I'm very dubious that the sort by open score again. I was gonna say I'm very dubious that like the open score means anything for running backs. It probably still
no. This is a dot for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like a dot, or it's just like how many snaps have you played in the 2-minute drill? Because dude, Roschon is just complete like 2-minute drill at the end of the game, down 17. It's over, and he's wide open in the flat because defense is playing prevent. With that being said, it makes me feel marginally better. And there's a huge gap between him and Alvin Kamara. He's 10.
Huge. I mean,
yeah.
It's only 57 routes. And Karain on his walkthrough said that for running backs, he likes overall the best. But for wide receivers and tight ends, he likes open score. He doesn't care about overall because it's the thing
catch
that
score is pretty noisy with wide receivers. I wonder if it's less noisy for running backs because all of their targets are like very similar. You should catch like 80% of your targets no matter which running back you are, because every running back's target is within plus or one, like plus or minus 1 yard of line of scrimmage. Catch all of them. If you're not catching passes, you're actually not good. Whereas even as ESPN tries to calculate it, catch score is much more volatile because receiver is such a different position. Yak score is a little more volatile too, I think. Open score is fairly sticky.
Open's just basically a way for us to because we don't have a great way to track all this on targets where they aren't targeted. And so it's a good way to spot breakouts, to Pat's point, where if a guy's always open, like a win last week was CeeDee Lamb, where he was really open, but he wasn't being used. And I think the biggest thing to do is to compare them to their teammates. So if you look at the other Dallas guys, and if you're no one else can get open, Gallup or Cook, which they can't. It's okay, that's got to be comparatively really cool.
Go. Oh, sorry, I was gonna say go sort by overall because Tyreek Hill is not doing well in it, and I think it's just one thing that outliers exist. You cannot account for everything. If your model perfectly predicted how talented every receiver was, it would have functionally solved the game. So yeah, I mean
overall has AJ Brown. That's kind of knowing ball a little bit to me.
No, yeah, I mean the model is very good. I think it passes the eye test, and it's some things about it are stable and it helps predict breakouts. But the fact that it thinks Tyreek Hill is the 19th best player, I don't know if there are any tight ends ahead of him. Maybe one.
Yeah, I mean,
receiver. It's gonna have misses, and that's fine. I tweeted a lot about this. It was a while ago, but he doesn't do well in yak score for partially. I mean, what ESPN Seth Pollard explained it as is because he is so wide open every time he catches the ball, you expect a lot of yak. It's really hard for him to be 10 yards past the nearest defender, catch a pass, and then to outproduce his yak. Because his yak expectation is that he runs untouched into the end zone, but he seems to be getting punished for that almost. He's yep, he did an average thing, but really that should almost be a null play where you can't evaluate Tyreek Hill's yak ability when there's no one within 20 yards of him. But it seems to sort of count those as average. But then it doesn't quite show up in his open score. So I think the model is just struggling to comprehend what's going on with Tyreek Hill. And I think that's fair. It is hard to comprehend what's going on with Tyreek Hill. He's a beast unlike we've ever seen. He doesn't fit the mold of a lot of other players.
Yeah. Tyreek Hill is I saw the back and forth on ESPN about him. But sorry, my family's visiting. My cousin, my nephew's just screaming in the background.
I can bear
the thing I want to say about Tyreek is a lot of it could just be, I mean, he's really fast, right? And just so good. But I think his scheme, I don't know how, maybe he's getting punished because his scheme is so good somehow. But I'm with you. How is he not one? But yeah, I don't know. You guys can check this out in my Discord. It's linked under Best Ball resources. Some people wanted to look at JT advance rate. The tool is this BBM4. I'll put it in the chat for you. It's also linked under Best Ball resources. Kyle, man, thanks so much for coming on. Kyle, Davis, and I have a high stakes team, which is it's on its back burner right now. It started off hot. It's still got a chance to make the playoff. You can follow Kyle at Kyle Tweets here. Kyle, man, what do you want to tell the people before we get out of here?
Oh, just follow me on Twitter. I post all of my stuff there, and check out the Roto-World Football Show.
All right, guys. For me, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Make sure you join the Discord. The link to do so is below. Have a happy Halloween, everybody. Make sure you dress up unlike Kyle did. You want to make sure you celebrate. I can't wait to see all the trick-or-treaters running around the neighborhood myself. I will have another show Friday at least for looking at some pick'ems, and maybe Justin Herzig and I are going to come on, I think, Thursday to talk about our BBM side bet. For Kyle, for me, enjoy your Halloween. Peace out, everybody.